We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf right here on the We Made This podcast network. And it is series 4. We are back for an entire new series, 6 episodes covering each and every episode of series 4 of Red Dwarf. My name is Mark Adams and I am your regular co-host. And with me at this time, as always, is Kurt North. Hello, Kurt.
Hello, Duke. How are you doing?
I'm all right. And our guest host at this time is, welcome back to Carl Bryan.
Hi, buddy.
Smooth. Very impressive greetings from both of you.
We try our best.
So yeah, we're looking at season 4, episode 1 today. We are looking at Camille. But before we do that, I was going to speak to you both about, has the last 3 seasons been what you expected? Because in my head, right, Red Dwarf, series 1 and 2, that was where it was finding its feet. Series 3, that was where it was transitional. And series 4 is where it hits its stride, followed by 5 and 6 being the best Red Dwarf. And I thought we'd maybe visit our expectations as we got this far into Red Dwarf. Was it a similar kind of a vibe for you, Kurt?
Yes and no. I thought season 3 surprised me about it. It has its absolute brilliant moments, but it has some questionable kind of quality in it as well. And I was surprised by that. I was thinking, well, season 1 and 2, yeah, great seasons, good start. Season 3 is where it really hits its stride, and you move on from there. But going through season 3 was a bit surprising in that regard, because it was all right. It was great. We had fantastic episodes in Polymorph, but then you get the likes of Body Swap. So, so it's like, it was a bit surprising. And there was certain elements of the show with the change in comedy that they were doing, that it felt like it was, it was, as you say, transitional. I think that's probably the good word for it, actually, because there was moments where it's like, all right, okay. And I wasn't expecting that. But having said that, the highs definitely were really high. So I think it was just a bit more uneven. Whereas 1 and 2 were consistently good. That, if you're rating out of 10, for example, you'd be saying something like, there were consistently 7, 8s, and 9s. Yeah. Whereas season 3 were anything between a 9 and a 6. So there was just a bit more stretched out. So yeah, but I am going to be looking forward to season 4. I think there's a lot. I haven't looked. I've had season 4 and 5 on in the background, so I've not really paid attention to them. Just put them on, and I think that season 4 is going to be an interesting one to deep dive into, to see if the quality does peak up again and pick up and see how we get on there. So yeah. It's certainly been an interesting ride so far, and I'm looking forward to going through the whole thing now, because it's just, we're seeing Red Dwarf in a completely different light, and I really think that's a great thing.
I think you're right, and for me, I felt that I was ever so slightly wrong, in as much as I felt like by series 2 it had found its feet, and then series 3 it was even more of a change than I remembered. And it waveformed in quality series 3, which, again, I didn't really remember. I remembered it being consistently good in series 3 before it got fucking brilliant with 4, 5, and 6. So it surprised me a little bit. Like you said, the quality, the fluctuation in the quality of series 3. How about you, Carl?
I think for me, it's interesting, because series 3 I always had in my head before this as being a very high mark and better than 2 and 1. But going through this, I've found more of an appreciation for 2 than I have for 3, just because of some of the actual concepts that come about in 2, with things like Thanks for the Memory and Stasis Leak and things like that. I actually now if I go back and watch some things, I'll probably go more towards 2 than 3. Like you say, 3 definitely has that transitional period. It looks a lot grimier, for lack of a word, grungier almost, for lack of a word, in 3. Almost like it's trying to be more adult. And I think that comes across a bit more in the comedy in that as well. There's more swearing, there's more sort of risque jokes in 3. You know, there is one of my favourite jokes with the Hudson breaking a brick. You know, there's more that kind of stuff. And I think when we get to 4, which is the season that I first got into Red Dwarf as in watching live, I think they've kind of, it's that thing of, I think it's a Doctor Who thing where he says, I was trying to be, you know, angry and, you know, all the things you are when you're young, you know, bold and sweary and that, and then I kind of settled down. And I think that's where we hit the stride with 4, 5, and 6, is they're gone, right, we've tried being a bit more risque, let's get that mishmash of 3 and 2 together. And I think that's what we hit with 4, definitely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that Series 2 was a pleasant surprise, and Series 3 was a little bit of a disappointment. So I have very, very fond memories of Season 4, Series 4. So shall we get into it and have a look at Camille?
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
So, starts with the new theme that we saw at the start of Series 3, but the credits, the images that you see are completely changed. There's Crichton's spare heads, a simulant, Cat high-fiving himself, and Lister looking like RoboCop. And as a kind of, this is what you're gonna get in Series 4, I was like, yeah, this is a nice selection. What did you think about the change of the theme?
That was a question I wasn't expecting. It's the action-packed stuff, isn't it? You know, it's a good representation actually. But I mean, I'm sure when we come to talk about Camille properly, I'll speak about the episode soon. But yeah, it's I haven't got much more to say other than that. Yeah, it looks good, and it's a nice wide range and stuff really.
And no baseball bat / nunchucks.
Oh, that's
where
true.
he hits himself in the balls.
Yeah, that's true.
How about you, Carl? Did you how do you like the way that they do this with every season once the new theme tune hits?
Yeah,
I like that. I really like that.
Yeah, the montage, I think, I do like the montage. I do pine a little bit for the theme from Series 1 and 2, just because I really like that bit of music. I do think this montage is probably one of the oddly weaker ones out of the lot. It's still good, but I think there's better ones. Like, I do enjoy the 3 where he whacks himself with a nunchucker. I think that's a fun exclamation point to the title sequence. But I remember watching this, even when I watched it again the other day for this episode, I was like, oh yeah, there's the Not Godzilla clip that pops up in there.
Oh, the evil bird thing.
Yeah. And even now, it'll still catch me up. Like, what was that? No, what episode is that? And I realise it's, oh God, it's gone from my brain. What episode is it that it turns up in?
It's the Wax Droid one, isn't it?
That's it. It's, yeah. It's the Wax World one. And I always forget the Wax World one for some reason. Even though it's a really good episode, I always forget that's there because it's got all the bits and bobs dropped into it. But yeah, that always catches me out, the little, as I call it, Not Godzilla. But it's good. I still like the theme tune at both ends, as it were, now from Series 3 onwards. I do pine for that Series 1 and 2 theme. I had it for my alarm clock for a while.
I don't think the Season 1 and 2 theme would wake me up. I need something punchy.
This morning I have swapped it to the intro music from the Ninja Turtles movie. The da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That gets you up.
Wow.
That really does.
Brilliant. So the episode starts with Lister in the quarters trying to teach Crichton how to lie with fruit. And Crichton is struggling. Basically, Lister wants to teach him so that he can break his programming. And eventually, he kind of sort of gets there, but then can't do it in front of the cat.
What a great way to open a season. it's a memorable. This is one of the memorable Red Dwarf moments for me. It's a prolonged period. It's a banana. it's just an incredible piece of television. I think that for giving you an idea of what season 4 is going to be about, and having Crichton having this like 1-to-1 with listeners, I think is a marvelous piece. And obviously some of the ways that he's trying to break his programming, and something I wanted to touch upon actually, which I think is really interesting with right at this moment in time where we are with Red Dwarf, is that we had the last episode, which obviously is about Crichton and an expiry date and whether or not he's got, how much life he's got left to live, and if there's a silicon heaven. You've got this one in which he falls in love, and you've got the next one where he's trying to become, where he becomes human. Mm-hmm. And if you explained any of those three episodes to anyone, you'd think we'd be talking about Star Trek. You would think that's what we're talking about. And it's just interesting how they've picked up on Crichton from his first appearance to all of season 3, that we get the back end of season 3 and the beginning of season 4, which concentrates pretty much on Crichton.
I think you're right, and I think this scene is incredibly funny, but looks at quite a heavy and strong, almost tropey science fiction thing of the idea of an AI's virtue through their programming, and whether or not it is a good thing that they try and break that programming and become more human. And even though, it's an apple, is really, really funny, it really highlights the kind of struggle that an AI might have on this sort of thing. And it's just so fucking Red Dwarf that have this serious sci-fi concept, but let's make it really funny, but still make you think if you take a step back,
Yeah, I mean, also something I realised is in terms of continuity, we're following on from the last day where Crichton does lie about where do all the calculators go, and this I thought it was quite cool that this is Lister carrying on from that.
Yeah.
In what may have been like a one-off, or you may not even think Crichton's lying at the end of the last day and that he still does believe where all the calculators go. And then in this, carrying on, that list is like, right, Crichton may have the possibility of doing this. Let's try and do it with fruit.
Lister gives examples of noble lying, and Crichton understands the concept but still can't do it. Rimmer comes on screen and tells them that Crichton is late for asteroid spotting. I mean, who'd be late for asteroid spotting? And then Lister asks... I can't even read my notes. And Lister asks him to describe Rimmer, and of course he refers to him as a smee. Which... How many times have I watched Red Dwarf? How many times have I seen Crichton go smee? And every single time I sit there and giggle like the 12-year-old I was when I first watched this.
I mean, bless Robert Llewellyn. He makes it look painful. He makes it look like it really hurts for him to do this.
I think it's the commitment that makes it even funnier. Robert Llewellyn's face is a thing.
Yeah. Just the... I think my favourite... Everyone sort of does the smee. My favourite bit is where he does actually manage to round out the G. The smee. It's really... just really forcing it out. And, I'm amazed that there's not more... I've not seen any bloopers of that bit, but there must be a lot.
I tell you what's interesting as well, and I'm not jumping back a little bit, just while it's in my head. When you said about it's an apple, like that, that's the first moment that we get of that voice, and we get a lot of that voice in season 7. And season 7, for all its misgivings, one of my favourite elements of season 7 is the Crichton jealousy, and when he just goes, "You were lying," and all that sort of stuff.
I think he's always been neurotic, but season 7 is where he's at his most neurotic, and that voice it's just I fucking love Red Dwarf. it's not my quotable Red Dwarf, but there is a line that I think everybody loves in this scene as well. Spin my nipple nuts and send me to Alaska. It's a good one. It's definitely a good one.
That is the only one. That's the only one I can ever recall people outside of my bubble saying when I was at school. Like it was a line that people in general, whether then that they watched Red Dwarf or just passively watched it rather than being a bit geeky about it, would say that line. I physically remember people saying that quite a bit.
Is it the first example of him doing the sort of something and something joke? Because I know there's Screw Down My Diodes and Call Me Frank. I can't remember if that's this series or last series. But yeah, it seems like every season Crichton gets a good gag.
Yeah.
And then he builds on it, like this one. Is it season 5 he gets the Space Corps directives?
No, I think haven't we already had Space Corps directives?
We've had a Space Corps directive. We haven't had a misquoting of the Space Corps directives yet.
In Starbug, Crichton fails to call Rimmer a smeghead again, and then Holly comes on screen with a distress beacon. Crichton wants to help, but Rimmer says it's too dangerous, and then Crichton manages to lie, telling Rimmer he's headed back to Red Dwarf when he actually goes to answer the distress signal. And so the noble lying thing has kicked in there, hasn't it?
It has. Something I noticed about this is it was something with Rimmer in that obviously Rimmer's very militaristic. Is militaristic a word? It is now. Militaristic. And how he's, just the fact that, but he's a hologram. He can't enforce his will. Yet, if he says to Crichton, like, we're going asteroid spotting, Crichton will do it. And it's in that moment of where Crichton starts to lie, you can just see how Rimmer's world can so easily completely fall apart if somebody just goes, no, I'm not going to do what you say. Yeah. And he's stuffed. He's completely stuffed. Because all he can do then is sit there and take it. And in this case, he ends up radioing back to Red Dwarf to go, I'm stuck, basically.
I think it's interesting that in previous episodes, they've looked at the sadness of Rimmer not being able to touch anything. Whereas this is kind of like the almost comeuppance that in the past when he would have been able to physically be cowardly, he's almost scuppered from being able to be cowardly. So I think it's nice that they look at the not being able to touch thing in a balanced way.
Yeah, but also as well, if you think about the Crichton's own programming, that, about it's human life, respecting human life and stuff like that, that the fact that he's lying because he's trying to find the potential of the 1,000,000 to 1 or 15 million to 1 of a survivor. So the fact that that's part of his cognitive processing as well.
So it's almost a transition at this point, you think? Yeah, good point. Yeah. Good point. So yeah, as Carl says, in the quarters with Lister and Kat watching Tales of the Riverbank, The Next Generation, Rimmer does come on screen and say Crichton's gone a bit bonkers. And I just wanted to point out, I did smile and think about you, Kurt, when there was a cheeky Star Trek dig with Tales of the Riverbank, The Next Generation.
Well, thanks for thinking about me. Much appreciated.
I never noticed the Star Trek digs before, but Red Dwarf does it more than I remember.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there's the famous Lister one, isn't it? Don't give me the Star Trek crap, it's too early in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, that one's the obvious one, but this one is clearly a kind of like, have that in the ribs. But it's really playful, and I think they're probably more fans of Star Trek than they are mocking them, whereas there's some stuff where they're savage, and I'm like, you really don't like that. The PE teacher's gag randomly comes to my head, like, what the fuck did PE teachers do to you? This joke isn't anywhere near as savage as that, you know?
Yeah, it's playful, isn't it?
It's funny, really, because isn't Patrick Stewart a big Red Dwarf fan?
Is he?
He appeared on that BBC. I remember the night he appeared on the Red Dwarf night on BBC Two when they had that, and he was commenting on it, wasn't he? So I think he is. Yeah.
I remember that because I'm sure he said something like he heard that there was this other show that was making a bit of a taken a few jabs at them, and he watched it and it was like, oh, this is actually quite good.
I like Patrick Stewart. I
Yeah,
like.
he had his injection the other day. Did you see that on Twitter?
I did. Well, by the time this bloody airs, he'll have had the second one.
Yeah.
Well, as he should. He's a captain.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's also like 90, isn't he?
Like, frontline workers and captains of the Enterprise first.
He's 80. He's 80. Here we go. But on my Star Trek Picard podcast at Jean-Luc Porrard, he's
still the best Twitter name I've ever heard.
He's Jean-Luc Picard is about 10, 12 years older than Patrick Stewart is. So he's in his 90s. So, but
Right.
he's 80. He's actually 80.
Right. Okay. But I love him, and I love his friendship with.
Yeah, McKellen.
Thank you. I was going to say Magneto, and then I realised that was a really dumb thing to say. But no, I love how. I just think they're lovely. These kind of two grumpy old men who are grumpy in the right way.
I once went to say it's slightly off topic a bit. I went to see Brian Blessed. He performed a Q&A at where I work as part of the film festival we do. And I never realised he went to acting school and school with Patrick Stewart.
All right.
And he was telling stories about them jumping on trains together to go to London, to go to acting school and things like that. And it's a television series I'd watch.
Yeah. I bloody love Brian Blessed as well, but this is very tangent tornado.
And well, yeah. While we're on tangents, let's continue on tangents. The show Vicious was directed by Ed Bye, and it's got Ian McKellen in it.
Yeah. Anyway,
don't know why I said that, but you know.
Anyway, so Ribbon says it's all Lister's fault. Lister kind of agrees, and Lister and Kat say they will come after them and help them out. On the planet, Crichton is searching the wreckage, and he falls off the edge of a chasm. He's helped up by a female mechanoid who introduces herself as Camille, who is a 4000 series GTI.
GTI.
That's a favourite gag of
Very
mine.
90s joke, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And did you know? Well, I said this off air just before we came on, because on my last viewing of this, the music turns very Blade Runner. It's that synth on Blade Runner, and it was like, oh, I've never noticed that before.
Until you said that, I hadn't noticed it.
Yeah,
me either.
So it's and it's only like 2 bars. It's only 2 bars. That's it, done, sorted, and then we move on.
I thought the Crichton hanging off the rail thing was quite impressive looking. It's something I don't think they'd have done before. He's blatantly tied to something, but it's. I thought it was quite impressive.
Yeah, it's a nice shot, particularly with the kind of mechanoid hand coming down before the reveal that it was a female. Yeah, I liked that a lot. You're right.
I think with this series, what we'll start to see, or what we've started to see, is because now they've got a home base. Because this is the first series they moved to Shepperton,
Right.
so now they've got the sets on set and there the whole time. So they're not rehearsing in like a gym anymore. They're rehearsing on the set, and I think this is why we hit that kind of peak period of 4, 5, and 6. Because now they're rehearsing on set, and they know it's maybe easier for them to get into it, or they can work out more physical stuff and things like that. And I think that's the way, because they've done that ever. I think that's why there's a problem with Back to Earth in a way, because they haven't really got sets in Back to Earth. It's a lot of green screen,
Right.
I think, anyway. But then when we go back to the Dave series, it's a set again, and I think that's why the quality goes up when we get to the Dave series.
We've got a lot of green screen in Coronation Street, so
Have you?
that's about it. Yeah, So
Coronation
it's
Street has green screen.
No, they film on Coronation Street.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yep.
So, yeah, they flirt, and it's adorably awkward, and it gets to the point where she asks him if he believes in love at first sight, and he says that he E5A90887s her. And I'm just like, ah.
The thing that I noticed, I didn't notice much until I rewatched it for this, is the GTI model has got the realistic toes. Why do you need realistic toes?
Well,
when the rest of you is still quite blocky, but you've got realistic toes.
I mean, she's got the Madonna boobs going on. You'd think she'd have realistic boobs rather than toes.
Well, yeah, there is that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, you know, if it's Madonna boobs, that was the style at the time.
True.
I've just got Alan Partridge in my head where it says it must be in their contract.
Wow. I think it's probably just a dig at the whole GTI culture of the 90s, isn't it? That all the little souped-up bits were pointless.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget the WD-40 either, because that's a little great
gag.
gag.
That's a good line, yeah.
Gag. This is heavy on the gags, and they all hit, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, even the point you're saying about the E5A908B7 year, the fact that it says using hex rather than binary, and it's actually, you know, it's actually using proper terms and stuff, which I thought was quite nice.
It's so nerdy, isn't it? And we have no problem with that, obviously.
No.
Rimmer's on the radio, and Camille is suddenly quite cautious and doesn't want to go aboard Red Dwarf. So Camille is quite frightened and trepidatious, but when Crichton introduces her to Rimmer, OMG, she's a sexy hologram.
Yeah. We just pass over one of my favourite lines, and one that I do use in everyday conversation as the trope of this podcast.
Good.
Which is, you'll like them. Well, some of them. One of them. Maybe. And I really love that line. It's just that brief glimpse of Crichton being honest with himself.
I think
that the people he hangs out with aren't the best, but they are the only ones left.
But you've been like that with a friendship group, haven't you? You've got a new partner, and you're like, right, you're going to meet my friends. You'll like them. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not mentioning any names of the friends that I think of that for.
The thing with when Rimmer sees the hologram, what's really interesting for me is that the Crichton's creators are saying that they tend to have them wearing like thigh-length boots, because the hologram's wearing thigh-length boots, and Crichton's creator wears thigh-lengths as well. It seems to be a trope of like early 90s, like if they're going to be, you know, kind of this is what Rimmer's imagining kind of thing. And then Crichton's creators wearing like knee high as well, like proper thigh high boots as well, which is an interesting fashion choice.
They were quite fashionable in the 90s, weren't they? Wasn't this the kind of era of the FMBs with girls in nightclubs?
Yeah, Pretty Woman.
What's an FMB?
Fuck me boots.
Oh, right, okay.
Maybe Mark and I were maybe a bit too quick to say that.
What do you mean? I've got a pair downstairs.
I haven't.
He says. So again, there's a lovely scene where we've just seen Crichton flirt really awkwardly in his way, and then immediately Rimmer flirts really awkwardly in his way with the hologram. And there's something really charming about the idea of a pleasure gelf being able to flirt with anyone and make it feel real for them. And I think there's something about loneliness in both Crichton and Rimmer in this scene, where it's basically the same behaviour from Camille that's almost like a hidden sadness to the story.
Because Rimmer appears to be, in those brief moments where he's chatting to his Camille, genuinely happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's even caught off guard when he gets called charming.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows that there is, in all four dwarfers, there is this kind of shield of bravado and you know, everything's great, or keeping up appearances, and then there are the moments in the show where it just drops. And I think this is one of those moments. I mean, the only two it doesn't really happen to is Lister and the cat. But for Rimmer and Crichton, who are potentially two of the loneliest characters because of sort of what they are and in Crichton's case, he's not used to it because he's breaking his programming. This for them is a massive culture shock almost. And it's almost the same for Rimmer. I think Rimmer's almost the sort of second most important arc in this to Crichton.
Yeah,
I think.
It's interesting because Lister, the way Lister is, is more like a pally. It's like almost like he's had these kind of relationships before in the past.
Yeah.
Where you know that Rimmer hasn't. And it's like, Rimmer's like, he's caught more off guard with it, where Lister wouldn't necessarily be that way because he's used to that kind of relationship. And, they've only been out of stasis for 2 years, 2 and a bit years. Whereas Rimmer's like, he's never really had that.
No. And I think without wishing to make assumptions about the kind of people that watch Red Dwarf, there's got a lot of people watching it that are more like Rimmer than are like Lister,
Yeah.
And I think I think it's important to get it out there that people can fall in love regardless of who they are. And I really think Camille is a fascinating character because every time it feels genuine. It feels real. Even with this 2-minute thing with Rimmer, I'm not really like that anymore, but I've been as awkward as Rimmer is. Everyone's been a virgin, and to see that done so well, it was still funny. But again, a lot of stuff with Red Dwarf, you take a step back and you're like, fucking hell, that's actually quite deep. So in the cockpit, Crichton and Rimmer discuss Camille, and there is the comedy of misunderstanding, which is standard sitcom, but still very, very funny and just a little bit sci-fi.
I like the fact that you don't get it much in, especially 90s sitcoms, between two men, although I suppose you could say Crichton is asexual with being an android. Just one turning to another going, do you think I'm attractive? And the fact it's never really a big deal. Rimmer just goes, no, it's there's none of that gay panic or whatever that you would have got in a lot of 90s things. Rimmer just turns around and goes, no, it's that thing of...
Yeah, it's not about him being presented as male, it's about him being ugly.
Well, they touch up on this next episode as well, actually, when Crichton changes to human. Yeah. But we'll talk about that next week.
Also, we discover another element of Rimmer's neuroses is he thought his sister-in-law was attractive, which obviously would have built on his resentment of his brothers. Yeah. Even more so.
Yeah. We do always tend to point out the holes, the mistakes, the inconsistencies, but there are some little subtle bits like that reinforce established storylines and neuroses of the characters that we should be highlighting as well as the gaffes, I think. So, in the med bay, Crichton introduces Camille to Lister, and she's a leather-clad space babe, and Lister flirts with her and he's very forward yet really charming. And as always, my complete ignorance of heterosexual culture, gay men are like that all the fucking time. Do heterosexual men genuinely flirt like that, though?
No. Well, some do. I've seen some who are very forward, but not with any degree of success or reciprocation. I thought it was interesting that originally this was supposed to be Kochanski.
Ah.
Yeah, right, okay.
But I thought that if it was Kochanski, Lister wouldn't be as forward as he is in this episode. He'd probably turn into an absolute wreck.
Yeah. You would play it completely different. It would be played completely differently, I think, if it was Kochanski.
Yeah, I think they made the right call, and I say that it might just have been they couldn't get Claire Grogan.
Yeah, I mean it's almost highlighting the slightly worse side of Lister. in that as soon as he's right on and he's teaching Crichton how lying could be noble and that, but as soon as he sees a woman, it's like, take your clothes off, let's get down to it. It's that kind of the lad thing.
I think there's some truth in the fact that, we need to repopulate the human race. And I like the way he flirts. That would work with me. But I can see why some women might not find that appropriate. But, again, it's not supposed to be a real woman. It's the ideal in Lister's head of how a woman would respond to his shockingly forward flirtatiousness and Spider-Man costume.
I was going to say, we've all got Spider-Man costumes.
I mean, I actually do, but,
I don't.
100% of the hosts of Writing the Childhood own at least one Spider-Man costume. And I'm sure this doesn't surprise you.
Has anyone got a Gwendolyn costume then?
Fraser's probably got one, yes.
I just like the idea now of you two just casually sitting, sipping tea in your Spider-Man costumes, watching Recess.
Well, there is a YouTube video of us in our Spider-Man costumes watching shit.
Well, I'm now pretty scared because Mark and Fraser are due to come on WandaVision, and if they do that, I won't be able to get through the episode.
Immediately sends message to Fraser. But it gets to this point where Rimmer comes in and he's seeing the hologram and Lister is seeing the space babe, and they hear different responses to the same questions that Rimmer's asking. And Lister eventually works it out that there's something not right, and Camille admits that she is a pleasure gelf.
We're talking about it being consistent from a character point of view, that Lister, in the past we've said that Lister's smart-wise, and, this is a perfect example of that. It's like, he's recognising that. If it had been any other character, Kat wouldn't have recognised it, Rimmer wouldn't have recognised it. It's the fact it was like, hang on a second, they're hearing something different to what I'm hearing. Why is that? Why is that? Come on, he's really smart on that, and really clever and quick to pick that up.
Going back to the thing we mentioned before about Lister has, out of the four of them, Lister's the one who's had these relationships before, and so he's experienced kind of all sides of it. When it's revealed, he almost seems the least affected.
Yeah.
When his reaction is, he pretty much just goes, it's that thing of, oh, well, I've been disappointed before. It's that kind of reaction, whereas everyone else is absolutely gutted.
And that's probably why she chooses Lister to tell first, so that he's the one who will take it best, and then it can kind of trickle down to the rest of them, maybe. Okay, so in the corridor, the cat asks what's up, and Lister explains what a pleasure gelf is. The cat enters the medical bay, and hi, buddy! It's himself.
Oh, that is a gag and a half, that. I've always loved that.
To say that the laugh is, the audience reaction is genuine for a bit of split screen, it's it could have gone quite badly wrong from the reaction, because obviously they can't see I'm guessing they watched it on a monitor or something at the time. But it's such a great gag, and it's the debut. I think it's the debut of the classic white leopard print jacket.
Beautiful.
The zebra jacket, sorry.
Just beautiful.
Before it turns yellow.
Yeah. And something I noticed as well is when Lister describes what he thinks Kat's going to see, the Valkyrie with the bosom you could ski down. In the books, I think it's in Better Than Life, when he goes to find the cat lives in like this palatial mansion surrounded by blonde-haired Valkyrie women with bosoms you could ski down. So that I liked that bit of, even though it probably came later, that little bit of continuity of that is the cat's ideal woman almost. But I enjoy the moment of him admitting my vanity has worked against me here.
And when he comes back out and speaks to Lister, there's a lot of quotable dwarf in this episode, but the one that I have picked is, "Get me a brandy." Whenever I see a hot guy, I'll nudge a mate and I'll go, Ooh, get me a brandy. And I've done it forever. It's one of my absolute favourites. If there's someone sexy on the telly, get me a brandy. I don't even fucking like brandy.
I was going to say, do you actually get the brandy?
I was going to say.
Well, cognac is brandy, right? Are they the same?
Yeah,
sort of.
Yeah. Same sort of
I'm all right
family.
with a cognac. I don't think I've ever had brandy. Or maybe if they're the same, I have. I don't know. But, yeah, you know what I'm getting at. I say it when someone's hot, all right?
No, I'm just asking if anyone actually gets you a brandy.
I mean, I'd accept it if they did.
You see someone like Fraser stood in the bar and all of a sudden this drunken arm reaches up for the ground and get me a brandy. 10 brandies in.
I don't think Fraser owns a pair of jeans. He wouldn't get into a bar. So, in the quarters, the boys are discussing Camille, and Lister points out that she didn't mean any harm, and she couldn't help it. Holly doesn't have any desires, or maybe her screen was foggy. Then Camille enters and apologises to all four in turn, but she singles out Crichton and says that she actually felt something special for him. And I think even before she said that, they'd already kind of told that story already. As much as it probably did need a confirmation, I think that the nature of the narrative had already kind of told us that.
I think it's worth reinforcing, though, because it then leads into the back end of the episode, doesn't it? I think it's just kind of like, we've gone through what this person is, and we've gone through that there's a special connection between Crichton and Camille. But then, we're going to the back end of this now, so it's kind of like sort of just putting a little full stop on that to say, okay, let's move on to where we want this show to go.
Yeah, it made me wonder, because obviously there's the connections there, and it's very obvious from the moment they meet. And then it's revealed later on that Camille's kind of been on her own for many, many years. And it made me wonder if when she first meets Crichton, obviously the appearance will change because she can't help that. But personality-wise, that is her rather than... that's more her than it is the actual Gelf talking.
Yeah. So and then, talking about Star Trek, there's an episode of Famke Janssen. Is that the one that where there's an episode where she's always going to be the same character. She's always going to be Famke Janssen in it was like an early Trill kind of idea, where she's in a stasis booth in not on holodeck on the ship, and the first person, and she's a gift for a warring faction of another planet, and when she comes out of that, she bonds, and she actually bonds with Picard. Because that's the first person she's met, and she's designed to bond with that person and fall in love with that person. Now, it's slightly different because obviously Camille's not designed to fall in love with that person, and she's just coming out of it. But it's very similar kind of sci-fi trope in that, it's the first person that she sees, she has an affinity for and kind of falls in love with. And it is the right person to do that because I couldn't imagine like any of the other three having that affinity.
Yeah, and when she apologizes to the others in all her different forms, you can almost sense the different levels of how sorry she is in a way.
Yeah,
in the Lister's one, it's a bit like, "Oh, sorry, Dave," because she knows that Lister can handle it. Rimmer's one seems genuinely sorry,
using the term Duke as well, which was really sweet.
Yeah. And then, of course, even the cat.
Sorry, buddy. It's Heartbreaker.
Daddy John Jules' reaction. Sometimes Daddy John Jules will, growl almost, or, contort his face a bit when he's trying to make the cat look angry. And that is one of those moments where he yells Heartbreaker. And the teeth are out and everything.
I think it's the reason why I love the cat so much. He does not get the lion's share of the lines, but fuck me, he gets the best ones.
Yeah, I know that Danny John Jules has joked over the years that the cat episode always gets pushed or binned or this, that, and the other, but the cat's probably got the richest history.
Yeah,
in the whole show. He's got the story of the cat people, and he always gets some form of massive woofer of a gag, be it this or the end of Backwards where he's in the bushes or something like that. It's almost precise in that he only strikes once, but when he does, it means something.
And I'm sure that the vast, vast majority, probably 4 out of 6 of each series of my quotable dwarves are the cat. We're 1 for 1 in series 4.
And to be fair to them, the latest Red Dwarf is a kind of a cat focused element.
The Promised Land.
It's quite a big, yeah, it's cat focused. So it's it's everyone focused. It's a full hour and a half, but there's a lot for the cat and his history. So it's good that they actually come back to it, so far into the show.
I still want to see a 0G football game though.
One day, Carl. Maybe Red Dwarf the movie.
Maybe that's what the coronavirus special, the postponed one that Craig Charles, it's just a 0G football game.
Maybe. Eventually, Camille says that he won't like her in her true form, and she turns into a green blob with an eye socket. And Crichton genuinely doesn't care and says he likes her and he's a mechanoid, so he can't lie. And then asks her to dinner. And my heart just fucking melted at this point. I aspire to be that person who can fall in, not that I believe in a soul, but who can fall in love with the soul. That isn't me. I'm monosexual and I need to be attracted to someone. I wish I was a better person like Crichton is here.
Yeah, and it's the way he delivers the line. It's like, so? What's the problem? What's the problem? I think it's really nicely done. Actually, I think it is good that they can do that. That they can push that kind of that thing towards it, because it's obviously the blob's been designed in such a way that it can't hold a drink. But that's another story for a smeggle. But it's a nice touch that it's just it doesn't matter. It's all about, as I say from the beginning, it's effectively Crichton never changes throughout the whole episode. And
it was at this point that I it kind of, the penny dropped that Crichton is pan-romantic asexual in 1991, and incredibly forward thinking and sympathetic depiction of something like this is genuinely incredible for 1991. And we've mentioned him earlier in the episode. My friend Fraser, who I do the Right in the Childhood podcast with, he is pan-romantic asexual, and he's always been starved of representation. So as soon as this penny dropped, I fucking messaged him on Facebook, and I was like, mate, you'll never guess. And so what we did was we recorded like a 5-minute thing where a pan-romantic asexual talks about this representation of that. So we'll chuck that in here. So yeah, pan-romantic asexual. And so I thought I'd find a pan-romantic asexual.
For the asexual angle.
I only know one, and it's you. Hello, Fraser.
Hey, hello, how's it going? Hello, listeners to Mark's other podcast.
Yeah, we do a podcast together called Right in the Childhood, which you may have heard already when we did our little special episode looking at Red Dwarf.
I snuck myself back into the Red Dwarf podcast.
Main show.
What's the ship called? I snuck myself onto the ship. Starbug. I snuck myself onto Starbug for one more episode, a main episode as well. It was interesting as well because, like, you told me about this episode. It was like, there's a Red Dwarf episode. We just started season 4, and I think there's an episode I think you'd really be interested in. And I really enjoyed the 2 episodes we watched last time. I just enjoy the show. I think it's really quite funny, and I'd never seen it before, and I should really watch more. Yeah, so it's good. It's good to be back on board, and yeah, you gave me like this this sort of like an asexual pan romantic vibe. So it's like, okay, so I went into this episode with that in mind, and it's sort of with that I sort of had a journey with it where I was like, okay, if without you saying that at first, it's really good that you spotted it. Actually, I think that our friendship is definitely embedded that in your mind. There's like a chip there. It's part of your program if we're doing the Crichton gimmick.
Well, you've always said to me that you feel underrepresented on TV, and that you're super pleased when you see a character like the one in
Todd from BoJack. Yeah,
from BoJack.
There's a lot of stuff like I get it. Asexuality is like it's hard for some people to understand, and it's also like a thing to sort of like with representation. It's a difficult one because characters can be asexual without you realising. Like, there's a lot of... If you look at the asexual community, there's a lot of people who identify with characters who may not necessarily... Like, it's never said on the show, or there's never a distinct thing on the show. Like
it wasn't said here either.
Like, SpongeBob was a big one for a long time, and then it was sort of confirmed a bit recently. We've talked about that before. And there's other stuff. And there's characters like this, like Crichton, and even... other ones you could maybe say, like, this was very interesting if you wanted to do like a sexual analysis of it all, because we also had a autosexual, someone who was into themselves. The cat was into themselves, so I was like, that's cool, and it's like, it's played off as a joke, but it's also like, maybe an autosexual would see themselves in that character and be like, it
certainly wasn't done in a mean way. It was played for laughs, but it wasn't mean, so I think you're right,
it wasn't
autosexual too.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is, because when you first said it, I couldn't remember which character you told me had the asexual angle, and then I was like, oh, it makes sense. It's Crichton because he's a robot, he's a droid. Apologies if I got the wrong terminology. Robot droid's fine, right? Because I know
robot droid.
Because I know sometimes
mechanoid.
Because I know sometimes in some fandoms it's like, oh yeah, they're a robot, and you go, oh no, actually they're this.
That's not what we're about.
Okay, that's all right. I'm not going to get some hate, and they're going to get that person off. No matter what. Oh, that's good. So yeah, like. We were talking about this. It's interesting because he's sort of asexual by design because he can't really have sex. It's sort of very similar to like Vision in the MCU. It's like he's designed that he can't have sex. Now, it's sort of spoilers for WandaVision. Maybe he can do, or like maybe not. Or Wanda's done something, but there is still like they still have the ability to fall in love, and I think that's the thing with like asexual people. And I feel. One of the biggest misconceptions of asexuals is that they're robotic and they have no feelings. And it feels like maybe that could be a misconception for robots as well, and for Crichton as well. Like in this, it's like, oh, he's just a robot, he can't feel emotion. But in this episode, he shows that he can have emotion just because he's not having sex. Yeah.
He absolutely falls head over heels in love.
Yeah. And the cool thing about the pansexual thing is, this is very easy to do in sci-fi because... everyone's a different creature. There was a pansexual link in Solo, a Star Wars story, with Lando and his droid. Yeah. If he falls in love with a droid, that is a very pansexual thing. Yeah, the droid may be like female, but it's like, it's not about the species or the sexual...
Captain Jack in Doctor Who as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it was cool to see in this that we sort of got an aspect of all sexualities in one. And... yeah, it was a nice touch, and again, like the pan-romantic angle in this one was, she was this bot that turns into your desire, and it was like, I want to see you in your true form, and he didn't care because it wasn't. Oh, it's not how you look; it's the connection there.
He'd already fallen in love.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. I always feel like building a relationship on emotion has always been key for me, anyway, in that aspect. And like, Crichton's got that thing of he probably won't age, as well. So
I think for me, the fact that we have seen 80s ick in Red Dwarf. There's been some unpleasant stuff, and some of it has been a little misogynist.
Yeah.
The fact that this was really sensitively done, and it was about love, I really liked it, and it did make me think of you.
It's one of them as well. It's like, it can be sort of accidentally on purpose. Like, either way, that's a lot of representation in all in LGBT communities. There's accidental or accidentally on purpose representation. Like, people just identify with characters because of the traits, and then it might not have been the director or the writers or the whole production crew's like idea for this. Like, this could have just been it's just nice to show, like, it's just a good episode to have for like laughs and introduce romantic interest. They might not have initially been thinking about, let's represent asexuals in this, because was this episode the 90s?
1991.
Yeah, so like asexuality might not have been a big thing then. I don't know, I wasn't born.
I don't think it was.
But like, you now put it on with like present day glasses and you can see it. It's why like a lot of people, like Frozen, will look at Elsa as like asexual. Like, it's not said, but like you see the represent, like some of the stuff in it. Like, she favours family over like, I need to get a romantic interest, and yeah, it's really nice. Did asexuality better than Big Bang Theory? I'll use this time to trash Big Bang Theory on their representation because they had a great opportunity with Sheldon to be like, he's an asexual, like,
Yeah.
but they played him off as that. They always played Sheldon off as a robot, and like,
Yeah.
his big thing of like when he fell in love with someone, it was like, oh no, I can finally have sex. Like that was the big cue. It was like, oh, when Sheldon has sex, that's when he falls in love. It's like, no, he can fall in love with someone without it, and it was nice to see that Crichton did that. Crichton was more human than Sheldon, in my opinion.
Fraser, thank you so much for sharing your opinion.
Happy to be on board.
So yeah, thank you, past Mark and past Fraser. I never really know how to reference in a podcast previously recorded shit.
It's a future echo.
Yeah, it's a past echo because we did it before we recorded this.
Okay.
Or is this the future echo? Or is it... So, Cat Lister and Rimmer discussed the date, and Rimmer says good luck to him, which I thought was lovely. Rimmer probably is hurting quite a lot inside after what happened, and he's not necessarily the bitter man that we think he is. In this case, he's actually thought about it rather than had his gut reaction of being the bitter guy who everything goes wrong for him. And I think as character growth isn't really something that people tend to associate with Red Dwarf, but I think this is really important.
Yeah, it's very matter of fact. It's not a big kind of, Rimmer's having a moment kind of underscore swelling of music of him, really coming to this realization. It's just like, no, good for him, And I think it's almost like they were all in love with the same girl and, the better man won, as it were, or something like that. And Rimmer's gone, she loves you. Go for it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that he's gone through this the same as Crichton as well. The fact that it's that he's at the moment probably feeling quite melancholy with the whole situation. Is in an unusual way they're both feeling the same thing at the same time in some ways. That it is kind of like, well, I know how I'm feeling about it, and it's not my thing. But if Crichton's happy to go with that, then fair enough. And because he's in that mode anyway.
Yeah.
Does Rimmer get his heart broken every series? Because in 2 he has the Lisa Yates one. Does anybody do it to him in 3? It's more of a recurring thing than you think, him getting his heart broken.
Yeah, I can't think in 3 what if there would have been one. He got his heart broken because of his soldiers.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Yeah, I suppose there is. And I mean, in 5, when we get to Hollership, is 5, isn't it? He gets his heart broken by Crane. So he has the most romantic. I mean, I know Craig Charles jokes about it in interviews and stuff, but Chris Barry and Rimmer do get the most romantic action in the whole series, doesn't they?
Yeah.
Until Kachansky comes back, I'd say, yeah.
I suppose so, yeah. But even then, he gets told that he's going to get killed doing the wild thing with Kachansky.
Crichton enters and asks the cat for fashion advice, and the cat is really quite mean, but it doesn't matter, and says that if he was dating a blob, that's what he'd wear, which is mean. Yeah. Crichton doesn't get it, so it don't matter. The date is at Parrot's Bar. They have a meal and they have cocktails and an adorably dorky and nerdy conversation and then some dad dancing. And to be honest, I'd probably quite like that date these days.
I love the shot of them in Starbug and Crichton's got his bow tie undone and they're just driving around.
Yeah. They have a drive in Starbug, they have a movie, and I love Crichton here. He's like a queer icon before his time, really. And I never even spotted it until, last week when I watched this. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And a thing to consider as well is that the amount of emotion that Robert Llewellyn is managing to put out, even though he's under an inch and a half of rubber, does show what he's like as an actor. Like I say, the scene where they're just flying around, he sort of looks over and looks her in the eye, and he's just smiling away, and you can see it, you can feel it, and I think it's very impressive considering that he's under something that must restrict his face immensely.
Well, we do see Robert Llewellyn without the makeup in the next episode, and his face is as rubbery as Crichton's without the prosthetics. The man has a very malleable face, and he's perfect for the part of Crichton because of it.
It makes me think he must really be pushing his expressions further than what you'd need without the mask on to make them come out, say, 70% reduced of what's actually on his face in what's on the mask.
Yeah.
I bet he has like a sore face after an episode of Red Dwarf because he's gurned so much, Well,
this would have been still in the 6 hours to put it on sort of stage, wouldn't it? It would have been the getting up at 4 a.m. to do it. So if you've got to put it on for 4 or 5 hours at first thing in the morning, you're going to make your acting count. I'm not putting this back on.
True. Yeah. Holly comes on screen and says that someone has arrived for Camille. Camille explains that it is another pleasure gelf called Hector, who is researching a cure. And I actually think that's really sad. After all this wonderful kind of I am what I am, be who you are, fall in love with who you fall in love with, she wants a cure. And I think that's really sad.
It depends what the cure's part for. If it's so that she can be herself and other people don't see what they want to see in her, I kind of get that.
But she can already do that. She's done that in the episode.
Yes, but I think she has to. Doesn't she have to sort of really try to do that?
Suppose so. Yeah.
Yeah. Just the fact if you've got this condition, I say condition. If you've been genetically engineered to do this thing, and it's probably caused you more harm than good over the years.
I'm just thinking exactly what you're just saying there. That's the whole point of the beginning of the episode, isn't it? The fact that he's trying to break his programming for lying. If she's trying to break her genetically engineered self as well, that the theme of the episode is breaking what you are designed or expected to do.
True. But anyway, she says she wants to stay with Crichton, which I think is lovely.
Yeah.
And then in the cargo bay, Crichton tells her to go with Hector and quotes Casablanca. And so he basically says that it's better for her to go with him because of the situation. And Camille leaves, and Lister spots the lie. Crichton blames him and calls him a smeghead.
The one thing I really like, though, it's underplayed and it's brilliant from Craig Charles, is the way that Craig Charles is playing Sam. He's just like, yeah, yes, Crichton. It's totally out of character, but he knows it's his moment. It's right, okay, I'm just gonna take a step aside. I'll just literally play it down, and I just think that's probably underrated. But I do love Craig Charles in that moment.
Yeah, I felt, and I wonder what you two think on this. The conclusion was really, really rushed, and it reminded me a lot of Thanks for the Memory. All this wrapped up in a minute. And wrapped up well, which is really hard to do in a minute.
Yeah. I think the fact that it's a gag for Casablanca helps because you're automatically thinking of that film. So the fact that, you've got the premise of what this episode is, moving to the actual lines pretty much that have been said in Casablanca leads you to think about that film while you're watching it, which preemptively kind of puts those emotions and that aspect of in there. And the fact that it does feel quite quick, but you've got Casablanca, which is what, a 3-4 hour movie, in there. And it's you've got all that backstory in the back of your head if you've obviously watched Casablanca.
Yeah. I mean, even then it's peppered into in references in the episode so early on. Like, from the very beginning, like in the scene with the fruit, he mentions that Lister's been making him watch Casablanca. It's brought up again during the Parrots Bar. Part of me wondered if all of the Casablanca references was just for the we'll always have parrots gag.
So I
just like the fact that the bar and restaurant is purely called Parrots, but the most that they were able to really stretch to the theme was 2 inflatable parrots.
I think, haven't we seen parrots before? Hasn't it always been parrots? Isn't that where Rimmer takes the drugs?
The last day. In the last day.
In the last day as well, yeah.
But this may be
Last
the first
episode.
time we've seen inflatable parrots in Parrots.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Is this like one of the last episodes where we really go to the more casual areas of the ship, like the restaurant and things like that? Everything else now from here seems like it's the bunks or it's off ship or a corridor.
I think
Maybe.
I think it's almost a treat when you're reminded that Red Dwarf is massive and has all these other areas that aren't the bunks or the cockpit or Starbug. It's always, for me at least, it's always like, oh yeah, Red Dwarf's massive.
What's the size supposed to be? It's supposed to be the size of a city, isn't it? It's
Next episode, they say, Kat says 5 miles.
5 miles, yeah.
That's a lot of ship. So yeah, that is Red Dwarf Series 4, Episode 1, Camille. Any final thoughts, Kurt?
No, I think it's a really solid season opener. I think it's it's as I said at the top, the fact that we've got 3 episodes back to back following Crichton is really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how that progresses through the rest of the season. It's strong. It's compared to Last Day, as much as I like Last Day, I think this is a much stronger episode, and I'm hopeful that we'll go through season 4, and as I say, that the quality will be not that the previous seasons haven't been, but the quality will be, substantially higher in consistency compared to season 3. So that's my fingers crossed for that. But yeah, a really, really, really good episode. I like the ideas of using the film references as a running gag. I thought that the idea that Crichton's trying to break his programming, which will come back time and time again, it is good. And it's nice that we've got a moment where, Crichton's been given a proper full-on episode, and, we get to see, what he's capable of. And, yeah, so far, really good.
How about you, Carl? Any final thoughts on Camille?
It's an understated gem, I think. It's not sort of a big action one or sort of in quote-unquote high stakes in terms of, like, if we don't do this, the ship explodes. But in terms of an actual story about the crew and their relationships and what actual life is like 3 million years into deep space, it's definitely up there and kind of showing, especially with their interconnectivity with each other. It's definitely a big episode for that. And I think it kind of gets not forgotten about, but put lower down with what's coming over the next couple of years.
Yep.
But it's a lot better. It deserves more credit, I think, than it gets.
I couldn't agree more, actually. This is a very underrated episode. It's not that people don't like it, it's the fact that I think people should love it. And my opinion of the episode literally changed on the recent rewatches that I had. And maybe as I've got older, I am looking for something a little bit different from Red Dwarf. And this blew me away. It's gone from an episode that I knew was there and I thought was fine to a favourite. And, good. I'm glad. It really made me smile, this episode. Not just for the laughs, but for the story and the really sensitive and thoughtful depiction of what love is and can be.
No, definitely.
Right, so, gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this episode. Where can I find you on the internet, Kurt?
You can find me down every back alley of social media. No, you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. where I will post most things that I'm on. I'm coming to the end of the Millennium podcast. It might well have finished by now, potentially. And that is The Time Is Now. So that's at The Time Is Now pod, which is a Millennium show, which was on TV 1996 to 1999. You can find me on the Xcast, the X-Files podcast on the X_cast. You can find me looking at the 9-episode, or rumoured to have 10 episodes of WandaVision, apparently, from what I read last night. We'll soon find out if that's right. On the podcast 616, which is we made this new podcast on anything Marvel related. So we've covered WandaVision. So if you wanted to go back and watch WandaVision and listen to me talk about it, that's probably the best place to find me on there. Star Trek Picard, as mentioned before, at Jean-Luc Poddard. And all kinds of other things, which I've probably forgotten about. So yeah, plenty of things to keep your eye on for me. And I'll be appearing on the OTP podcast, which is a Fringe podcast as well. I'll appear a couple of episodes a season on that as well. So that's it for me.
Just those few.
Just those few. Yeah, there might be more.
There is literally only one person I know that rivals me for the number of podcasts he's on. Carl, where can people find you on that there internet?
Right. So
it's rolling up his sleeves, people.
You can find me at Cerebral Jukebox, my podcast where we talk about earworms of songs that get stuck in your head. By the time this goes out, I should also have another podcast to launch called That Went Nowhere, which is myself and my friend Alison Matthews, basically just sitting down and talking about life and everything that goes on. She's a frontline worker, and I've been furloughed, so I've been bouncing off the walls, and so has she, but she's been at work during all of it. Also, I will be doing a series that should be going up for BBC Upload, where I cover a film from my life every year from when I was born up until I was 18. I've not named it yet, but that should be gone up by the time this goes out. And you can find all of these things at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl. I'm also now on TikTok because I've been in my house for the best part of a year. So if you want to see thirst traps, that is the place to find it.
Wow.
I've been seeing some of your videos, actually, and there's been some interesting videos. I don't know if you're putting them on Facebook as well, aren't you?
Yeah, they tend to go through to my Instagram and Facebook,
yeah. They've certainly been a delight at 10 o'clock at night when I'm leaving work and gone, oh, what's Carl up to?
Yeah, there's something to be said for being pretty much on your own 24 hours a day.
Well, I said that there was only one person who could rival me for the number of podcasts, and turns out there's two. So, my big fat dirty list. First up is a new podcast that will have just launched by the time this comes out. I'm doing a podcast about tattoos and the stories behind them. That's called Ink Stories, at Ink Stories Pod on Twitter. I also have, as we've mentioned earlier in the show, Right in the Childhood, which is the podcast about kids' telly. You may have heard the special that we did a couple of months ago, where I actually got the co-host of Right in the Childhood, Fraser, alongside me to look at Red Dwarf. That's at RITC Pod on Twitter. I also have a podcast about my job as a humanist celebrant, where I look at birth and naming ceremonies, weddings and relationships and funerals and death with a different guest every fortnight. That's at Life's Milestones on Twitter. And other than that, if you want me, my personal account on Twitter is at MarkAdamsHC. So, thank you for joining us here on Shipwrecked and Comatose. We'll be back next week. But until then,
Heartbreaker.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Free with this month's issue.
What I'd like to say right at the start is, like, that's the first time I've ever listened to this song on headphones, and I don't like how close Fred Durst sounds.
It feels like he's whispering it in your ear, doesn't it?
But like they've put some kind of weird little chorus effect on there, so his voice sounds really slimy as well, and it's like, oh, get the f*** out of my ear, Fred Durst.
That may be the Bluetooth connection and the internet connection.
No, because I remember hearing the voice from, like, you know, the TV speakers and stuff like that, and it definitely sounds like that, but it's just very fucking dry and in your ear, and it's properly on. ASMR Fred Durst is not a thing that I like.
I don't like ASMR anyway.
No. Some people do, but I can't imagine Fred Durst will be who they would be wanting to do it.
Life's milestones.
So, my fascination with Americans and embalming, am I just being weird and obsessive, or is it still a massive deal?
We had my mother embalmed when she died because we just thought it was the thing you had to do.
Right.
And usually embalming, if you're going to have an open casket, they have to be embalmed. Otherwise, they won't look so hot.
And they won't smell very nice either.
No, they would not. It would not be a pleasant experience for anyone. But if you're going to do that, I guess embalming is necessary.
Yeah.
And I don't like the idea. I mean, if I'm dead and you're drawing all my fluids out, then I'm definitely dead. So, it's like it is like taxidermy. I'm just on display for people to look at. I might as well be up on the wall.
Podcast 616, a Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast.
I was gone for 5 years and now I'm in a different reality. Whoa, what's happened there?
Luke's been blipped. Yeah. Luke's been blipped. Here he is. Luke's been blipped. He's back again.
So, Luke, it's been 5 years. I've got a few things to catch you up on.
Yeah.
What did he make to Loki season 6? Craig?
Well, what are we on? Spider-Man 8 now, are we? With Sony?
Yeah, but it's Miles Morales now, so that's all good.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.